Welcome everyone to Fischler College of Education, School of Criminal Justice. We are here on our YouTube channel and we are joined by my friend and guest, Ed Dentzel. He is with the Podcast Unfound. He is an investigative journalist. He is a filmmaker, screenwriter, and of course, very popular podcast host of the show Unfound, which centers on missing persons. I'm so happy that you're here with me, Ed, and we're in person, which is really quite amazing. So without any further ado, tonight we are going to do something that's a little bit different. And what's a little bit different is that we are here, first of all, in person, but also the anatomy of a missing persons case.
Why don't you move over this way a little bit?
Yeah. I guess we're having a little bit of difficulty with our tech support here. I know I'm a little bit out of the shot, and we're just going to tell our cameraman right here if he could just move it over just a tad, just a little bit more. There you go. All right, awesome. All right, so now we're both in. And I guess I got to get really, really close to you. I hope that's all right.
That's okay. I'm single.
Right.
That's okay.
Okay,
It's
that's
no
great.
problem.
Awesome. Okay, so we had a little bit of tech problems, but I think we're good to go now.
Mm-hmm.
And without any further ado, please help me welcome my guest, Ed Dentzel from Unfound.
It's been a while. We've been planning to do this for 2.5 years.
Yes.
April of 2020, and then a virus of all things got in the way.
Really? What was that?
I have a vague recollection. I think it was called COVID.
Oh, COVID. Oh, that's
But
right.
we've known each other for longer than we probably both realize, and now we are sitting in the same room
On
doing
each,
an interview.
on each other's laps,
That's-
practically,
yeah,
but
that's
that's
okay.
okay.
That's okay. We're all adults.
Yes.
And it's great to talk to you. It's great to be here. It was great to speak to one of your classes earlier today.
Yeah.
And
that
an
was
hour and
really
a half
fun.
went fast.
Yes, it
really
did.
enjoyed it. Got a lot of great questions. It was good.
Yeah, you spoke to my intro to criminal justice class, and I've been getting, my phone is blowing up with feedback, so
Okay.
I can't wait to share that with you.
Great.
And then we had a really nice lunch with our dean, Dr. Kushner, Jessica Rodriguez, all of our criminal justice students, project manager Joey Jasinski, and Michaela Porter. So without any further ado, I think we should just dive right in, don't you?
Sure. Why not?
All right.
Yeah,
so
let's do it.
let's talk about the anatomy of a missing persons case.
Okay. I've been studying disappearances for 6 years now. I would not say that it was something that I could have ever planned. I started out as a podcaster, and with kind of the not realizing that after 6 years down the road, who knew that the podcast would even last this long, that after 6 years, I almost consider myself to be a disappearance expert first. Instead of a podcaster who covers disappearances, I'm now a disappearance expert who just happens to have a podcast. And I don't know when that changed, but I think it has, and it was a conversation I had with somebody very recently. And the main point I think people should come away from this show that we're doing this evening is that even though I am inclined to believe that many of the disappearances that I've covered on Unfound, which I think is a wide array of different kinds, I think that it's a fair representation of disappearances as a whole. It's, if you were doing polling for a presidential election, if you had a poll of 265 people, you could probably predict who the next president is going to be. So I've covered 265 disappearances, so I thus think it's a good representation of what is really going on all over the United States with all disappearances. And even though I think that a majority of them are murders, I think it's important to understand that disappearances and murders are still very, very different things. The things you would talk about with a murder are very different from the items you will talk about with a disappearance. Of course, with murders, you're going to have a victim. You're going to know that a crime was committed. You're going to know probably what the method was of the person dying. Is it strangulation? Were they stabbed? Were they shot? Was it something else? Were they pushed off a cliff? With disappearances, you don't even know if a crime hasn't been committed. And we might get into this in that one of the tough things for police departments is that police departments, you're the police expert, I am not, but my impression is that police do just not investigate strange happenings. They investigate crime. And so this is one of the problems we run into, is that a lot of times police officers, investigators will show up to a missing person's call, and it doesn't even seem to them like a crime or anything has been committed. And so a lot of times investigators will be like, you know what, just call us in 24 hours, call us in 48 hours, and if the person doesn't come back then, you know what, then maybe we'll think about doing something about it. But if it is really a disappearance, those 24 hours, those 48 hours that are lost, you can never get those back. And I think that's many times why a lot of these disappearances last longer than they should.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that tonight we're going to cover, you had said, and you did this in my class earlier this morning, that there's 4 main topics that you'd like to cover tonight.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
We're going to talk about that rarely
Yes.
ever, and any proof that a crime was actually committed, as
Yes.
you just now said.
Yes.
Everyone moves on but the family.
Yes.
The passing of time can have both benefits as well as some challenges
Yep,
and
detriments, yes.
detriments. And when murder is obvious, why are the victims missing? Why aren't they left to be found?
That's right. That's kind of a new one that I added just
I love
recently.
it. I love it.
We've kind of
Yes.
covered maybe these topics in a different way
Yes.
some time ago, but that 4th one I added because it's been something that's been on my mind probably for a few months now.
Yes.
I'm always looking for new theories, new themes, new ways to look at disappearances, and that's one of them.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Good. So, I mean, where do you want to start?
We'll start with number 1.
Okay,
You know,
let's do-
sometimes there's not even any proof that a crime has been committed. And what I would say to that is that here in the 21st century, or even maybe going back to the late 1990s, my impression, I have no police officer experience, any official investigator experience, but police work in the 21st century has become very scientifically based, more than ever before, with DNA, with CODIS, fingerprints. Of course, fingerprints have been around for a long time, but more than ever, these fingerprints can be identified very quickly, getting down to the atoms and molecules of disappearances, and it's all been fantastic. And every week, it seems, you hear stories about a murder that happened in 1975, 1980, cold case, then all of a sudden, using DNA, maybe going through Ancestry.com or 23andMe, these DNA can track down that person, and a lot of these killers are already deceased, but the family now knows who the killer is. But what I think, my impression of talking to so many families over the last 6 years, is that real, us of a certain age, Dr. Telesco, we remember.
I'm way older than you.
Not that much older.
Yes, I think.
Not that much older. I don't think so.
I don't know.
But we remember when Columbo was on TV, and that what he showed, granted it's a fiction program, but what he showed was a kind of intuition. And I think my impression is that's kind of has been lost over like the last 25 years. That you get to the point, even with the public, we have the CSI effect. That if there's no DNA, if no forensics, even when you come to juries, if you don't have that information for a prosecutor, prosecutors might be afraid to go to trial. They're afraid that they'll be acquitted, and that the jury might say, well, where is that DNA information? Well, if you don't have that, then we're just going to acquit the person. That's all well and good, but for disappearances, a lot of that intuition has been lost. And that to have that intuition, though, you have to have that kind of experience. You have to know about disappearances. You have to be able to recite them off the top of your head, both the solved ones and the unsolved ones. That's the only way you can have that kind of intuition. I think it's been lost because we've become so science-based. You have to be able to look at something and know it without something under a microscope telling you so. I think that's been lost. So when it comes to this first topic, that's kind of one of the major points that comes up when I've talked to other people about this.
Yeah, I don't know if you're ready to talk about the family.
Sure.
But
It's your show. I'm not ready to answer any questions.
but one of the things that I've in my career in NYPD was working with the families post 9/11, as you know.
Yeah.
And in the very beginning, in the very first few days, weeks, and even months following the World Trade Center attack, these families held out hope,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so they were. Some psychologists might even argue it was a stage of grief that was major denial, right? Really thinking that their person was going to be found somewhere buried or something like that. In the missing persons cases that you've been looking at, that you've been exploring, some of the families that you've been actually interviewing,
Mm-hmm.
everybody moves on but the family.
That's
So
right.
can you talk a little bit about that nugget, which I think is really very valuable?
Yeah. What families have told me that every day of their lives, it's like the day after a disappearance. No matter if it's a disappearance that is 5 years old, that is 10 years old, 30 years old, it's always the day after. The pain never goes away. And I think a lot of them do realize that even if their loved one's remains are found, that this pain is going to stay with them. And that is, it's something, of course, I've never had that happen in my family. I try to put myself in their shoes as much as I can, but it's impossible to do. I don't have anybody missing in my family. I've never had anybody murdered in my family. I came to do this podcast from a totally different way, a different avenue, although there are podcast hosts out there who have started their own podcasts because of trauma, because of violence that they've had in their families, that's for sure. But that is something, unfortunately, with families, they find out that people do move on. If there is a young woman who's gone missing, for example, and she had a boyfriend, and it's not believed that that boyfriend had anything to do with the disappearance, you know what? That guy is probably going to move on. He's going to meet somebody else. He's probably going to meet another woman. They're going to have kids. They're going to get married. They're going to have grandkids. And this family, their 20-year-old daughter who has gone missing, they're still in the same place. Everybody's moving on because the fact is, everybody has their own lives to live.
Interestingly, I heard your lecture, this morning,
Mm-hmm.
and I've also heard your anatomy of a missing persons case before. So
Mm-hmm.
there's something here that you mentioned, that there was a missing persons case and someone spoke to the investigator who didn't even remember being responsible.
Oh yes, that's right.
For the disappearance of sisters.
Yes,
And there was 2 sisters.
Yeah, that's right.
That disappeared. Can you speak to that?
The guest is now one of my very best friends. Her name is Joyce Rivatuzzo. I spoke to her last time I spoke to her was back in July. She lost 2 daughters to a disappearance here in Florida in 1979. They were living in Live Oak. They were taken by 2 men down to this general area of Florida where we are, kind of southeast Florida. And these 2 daughters went missing, and an unsolved murder is attached to that. That's still unsolved to this day. So it's all put together in one. And what happened was about 2019, she'd gotten some additional information that from the police department, I think it's Pompano Beach, and it got sent to them, and the paperwork was all messed up, and I just became enraged. And I ended up tracking down the police officer who was responsible for these disappearances back when they happened. And I'm not going to give out his name, and in fact, I didn't write it down. Probably I could think of it if I gave me a couple minutes. But I ended up finding his information. I've ended up getting his phone number, and I cold called him. I introduced myself. Luckily he trusted me that I was saying who I really was. He didn't even remember these disappearances happening. 2 young women go missing. He was the lead detective on it, and the names did not ring a bell. I sent him a bunch of paperwork regarding these disappearances. He remembered none of it, even though if you go to for newspapers.com, you do a search for these disappearances, Peggy and Patty McDaniel, You will find his name. He is quoted. Can't remember a thing. Now, I will tell you, in talking to him, he's not a young man. He's probably into his early 80s, but in my opinion, he did not show any signs of dementia or Alzheimer's, as if forgetting. Of course, people, become forgetful maybe over time, but he didn't seem to show any of those signs that might worry you. It was just totally out of his mind. But this is another example of how not just friends move on, neighbors move on, but it seems investigators move on too. And this is why I've told families when some investigator or police officer tells them, hey, don't talk to that podcast, or I always remind these people, you know what, you can listen to them, but here's what I guarantee you. They're going to tell you for the rest of their careers not to talk to me, then they're going to retire, they're going to move on with their lives, they're going to go on vacations, and you're still going to be sitting where you are with no answers.
So again, speaking to the fact that everybody moves on but the family, and that's something that, and their loved one, by the way, is frozen in time.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's, like one of the families that I was very close to during 9/11, and that whole experience of helping them and assisting them and working with them, their 20-year-old son is still 20 years old. It doesn't matter that it's 20 years ago, kind of thing. And that's really the heartbreaking part. That's the part that I love about you so much also, besides the fact that you're fun, and I just found out that you're a piano player, which I didn't know that.
That's true.
Is this. You give voice to these people who are frozen in time. You give voice to them, you give voice to their families. But there's something that I want to just talk about, and I don't know if, you didn't mention it this morning, but we have talked about it on the show before. And that is something that a lot of police officers, law enforcement, investigators kind of fall into this pit of, and it's called confirmation bias.
Right.
We've talked about it on the show, where they've got this tunnel vision. They're thinking this one thing, this one suspect, or this one summary of a case, and that really, what it does is it prevents them from looking at any clues or any other tips or any other things. Is this your experience?
A lot of preconceived notions. I'm going to use an example of, even though it's not a disappearance that I've covered yet, it's still unsolved, so I guess there's the possibility that I will cover it. But I'm going to use this example because it's a disappearance that many, many people know, so they can identify with it. And that is the disappearance of Jennifer Kesse. I talked about this morning during the talk. That here she was a 24, 25-year-old woman, professional, educated, in real estate. She was engaged, but they weren't living together. Her fiance lived down in this area of Florida. She lived up in Orlando. Well, for some reason, the day after she got back from this trip that she took with her fiance, she didn't show up for work. And it is now, even though I wasn't there, but it is now well documented that when her family found out she hadn't showed up for work, which was very unlike her, just as unlike her as could be given the great choices that she had made in her life to that point. The investigators, the police officers who showed up, the family wanted them to take a report, and this, once again, is very well documented. The two officers who showed up told the family, she's probably off with some guy. Now, it's horrible, but that's what they did, and they shouldn't say that. It's not, their job to theorize. Their job is to take the information and try to find out what happened to Jennifer. But there they are saying these things. Now, I can tell you why they say this. They shouldn't. It's a horrible thing that they did. But the reason they say that is because probably most of the time in disappearances that they've experienced to that point in their life, when a woman roughly of that age goes missing, that's usually the issue, that she has run off with some guy. But what you learn about disappearances, even though we talk about timelines, we talk about social media, we talk about phone records and everything, disappearances mainly come down to the people. Who are those people? You don't even need to tell me what actually happened on the day of the disappearance. But if you were to tell me there's a young woman who's 25 years old, who's educated, has no addictions, is working her way up the corporate ladder and everything else. There is no way that I would ever believe that she went missing because she ran off with some guy. There's no way. Now, on the other hand, if you told me that she had maybe an addiction, if you tell me maybe she had dropped out of high school, if you tell me that she's had a very spotty work history, this, that, and the other thing, if she's poor or something, or is not that mature for her age, then sure, I could maybe understand that she might run off with some guy. But surely not people like Jennifer Kessie.
Right. Let me ask you this. One of your nuggets that you always talk about is that the passing of time is both a benefit and a detriment.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak more to that? I mean, what do you mean by that in terms of like the challenges,
Yeah.
the cost and the benefit to both of that?
I think, now you must remember something. For those of you who are new to Unfound, maybe haven't listened to the podcast yet, I do not cover very many new disappearances. In fact, the rule is that a disappearance has to be a year old before I will consider it for the podcast. There are many reasons for that we maybe don't have time to get into now. But what that means is the average age of a disappearance that we cover on Unfound is 20 years old. And in fact, this Friday or tomorrow, the disappearance we'll be covering is from 1976. So it's like twice as old as the average. So so it's important when you're covering disappearances of that age, you can't be negative. You have to start looking for those things. Well, it's 40 years old, what can we do now? And you start thinking about what changes over time. Well, one thing that changes over time is perspective. What the disappearance seemed like in 1976, maybe looking at those facts in 2022, you could look at it a totally different way. Because you can look at maybe the history of that area. Maybe you can look at, well, there were some suspects at the time, but they didn't seem that suspicious. Well, now, with databases online, you can look up people's criminal records like that. What if you were to find out that John Smith, who lived next door to these people who went missing, has had a long rap sheet since then? Maybe he's even been convicted of murdering somebody much later. These are some of the things that can be, of course, helpful if a disappearance is old. Now, of course, the detriments are that people die, people forget, as we talked about, people move on.
Investigators retire.
That's right.
Sure.
Paperwork gets lost.
Yes.
Things get lost in the evidence room. There are, of course, a lot of detriments too. But like I said, I think that there are some positives as well, and you really have to focus on those positives when you get to these disappearances. Now, I will say it, being that we're in the technological age with cell phones, when you get back like into the 1990s, like when you start getting over the average for the age of an unfound disappearance, that's when you probably, in my case, you have to start looking for those pluses for old disappearances. You have to start looking at people who were around at the time and see what they've done with their lives since. Things like that. That's probably when that starts to kick in.
No, you said something this morning, for the class when you were doing a lecture for my introduction to criminal justice class, and it really, I don't know why. In all these years that I know you now, and that we've been doing this back and forth, you said something and it just really hit me. I can disappear. I can leave. Right. I can leave here tonight. There are people who are expecting me at a certain hour.
Right.
Right? I'm not missing at that point.
No.
When, by the time I leave here and, make my way home, in that middle space, in that time in between, I'm not missing.
That's right.
I become missing after a certain period of time, which is the reason why police officers, and I know that civilians get very upset with this, but there is a certain period of time that we have to wait before we even take a report. But that's a detriment to the case.
That's right.
Why?
Well, I will give you an example of how important time can be to disappearances. There was a disappearance that I covered. Her name is Tiffany Johnson. She went missing in Texas. I happen to believe this is what we call a type of the man said disappearance. But she was having an argument with her boyfriend out in this apartment complex. Her brother was watching this happen. He kind of turns away for like a minute. He comes back. He can't see them anymore. He wonders, well, where did Tiffany and her boyfriend go? He goes down, can't see them. Well, he goes around the corner, and there is the boyfriend getting in his car and leaving. Tiffany is nowhere to be found. Immediately, this brother calls the police, and he already suspects that this boyfriend has done something, that he has, knocked her out or done something, thrown her into his car, and now he's taking off. That boyfriend or the brother called 911 right at the time. That guy, the boyfriend, ended up being tracked down an hour and a half later. That disappearance is still unsolved. Now, luckily, he was convicted for kidnapping, and he's in jail now, but she is still missing. So when it comes to that time type of thing, that what you're talking about here, that is how important time can be. And so getting back to what you're talking about, there is that very vague kind of idea about when does a disappearance start. It doesn't necessarily disappear. Like I was talking today, what if I walk out of this room? If I don't come back, does that mean I'm missing? Not necessarily. Or I'm going to be driving back to Clearwater Beach tonight. I'm not really considered missing until I don't get back there. Maybe not. I live by myself. Maybe not even until tomorrow when somebody can't get a hold of me. So it's all about expectations. Disappearances are about expectations. I expect this person to pick up the phone this time, and she doesn't. I expect him to be at work at a particular time. He doesn't.
Here's the thing. A lot of the missing persons cases that we've covered together, and you cover this every single week, by the way, right? Tell our viewers, how every single week,
every
right? What
Friday,
time?
2 p.m. Eastern is when new episodes come out. It's a weekly program, and as of today, September 22nd, 2022, that's a lot of twos. 268 disappearances covered.
Okay, so in 268 disappearances, how often is it murder? How often is it drug addiction? Via overdose, via drunk driving. You talked about one of those this morning.
You did.
So of these disappearances, have you been able to look statistically at what are the percentages and how does it break down?
You can do that, but the tough thing about disappearances, me covering them, I would say it's around 70%. Murders.
70%.
The other 30%, it's like a combination of factors, and you have to remember that even these ones that are murders, drugs may be involved. It may be a walk-off that turns into a murder or something, and those are different. There's different types of disappearances.
Right.
But just straight out, somebody was killed on purpose, just looking at that stark reality, it's about 70%. The problem is, of course, there's a lot of interpretation in there. If you find another person who has covered a lot of disappearances like myself, they may look at all the disappearances that Unfound is covered, and in their opinion, it's maybe only 60%. Or it's 75%, and a lot of it does come down to interpretation when you start getting to the fringes.
Yes.
So it's about, I would say, 70%.
Wow. Okay. And how, of the 266?
68?
268 cases, how many are actually found?
Of the 268 that I have covered, I think about 20 have been solved one way or the other. And some of them were suicides. Some of them were people who overdosed and are found in the woods. Some of them have been murders that were solved one way or the other. What I would say the distressing fact about many of these that were solved is that they were solved by luck. There was no actual logical, I'm going to make this choice on the investigation, this choice. It was somebody stumbled across remains in the woods totally by accident.
Right. So, I think that this also speaks to, and it's not one of your nuggets, but it speaks to the media influence. We watch these forensic shows. Well, I don't, because that's not what I'm into.
I don't either.
Anything to do with police or criminal justice, law enforcement investigations, I'm not into it, maybe because I was too close to it and I know how it really goes down. But I tell you that it's really dangerous because people watch these shows and they think that immediately forensics are going to solve this. Immediately we're going to get these 3 clues and We're gonna solve this case within the week.
Yeah.
We'll prosecute the individual, the perpetrator. He'll be sentenced and serving time, and everything is happy, and then a commercial,
Yeah.
cut to commercial kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is not the way it works.
No, especially not in disappearances because, like you stated, forensics, we're just going to go right to that and they solve it in 43 minutes. I've covered 268 disappearances. I think I've talked about forensics regarding DNA and that type of, once again, science less than 5 times. It's just not.
You
just not a topic.
talked this morning about a case that was a DWI, a drunk driving case, and she had been missing for 20 years or something.
About 11 years, Esther Westenbarger. About 11 years.
11 years, and then my question in the classroom to you was, were they able to determine cause of death? And your response was, and see, this is the reality in a CSI show, they're going to give you the cause of death,
Right.
which is like close to impossible. So,
Right. Well,
what happened in that case?
Well, Esther Westenbarger, I think this was a clear-cut case of you shouldn't drink and drive. I think that's what you learned from it. And I will even state, this just shows you how I've maybe matured as a person who analyzes disappearances. I was convinced back in 2017 when her daughter was on that Esther had been murdered. And the reason I thought that is because Esther has a brother who to this day is a horrible person. And he was out with Esther that night, but she was with other people. And I was thinking, well, he did something. He was jealous of Esther. He did something to her, wanted to get her money. She was driving a Cadillac. Did he part it out and get the money? And it's a very extravagant, very complex type of scenario that I had cooked up in my mind. I now know all these years later that when disappearances are solved, you find out that the solutions to them are very straightforward, very simple.
Simple.
In retrospect.
Exactly.
But it's not some grand conspiracy.
Right.
And with Esther Westenbarger, it came down to the fact that she shouldn't have been drinking and driving. She drove off a road, drove into a retention pond, she was on the wrong road, and she was found dead inside. The car was in drive, the key was on. There's no doubt that she drove right through this T intersection, and her family and friends were driving right by that retention pond for 11 years until by accident an HOA cleared this lake out, got all the scum off of it. Some kids went out there and found a car in the water.
Wow. Unbelievable. So, just kind of like looking at our time, because we do have a couple of criminal justice students who are kind of waiting in the wings to come in and ask you some questions. What if anything, in terms of like kind of summary and overall, your overall thoughts about missing persons cases, and anything that you want our viewers to know?
The main point I would say is I just don't think that disappearances are... I think they're taken seriously. I'm not going to say that investigators, police officers are necessarily blowing people off, but what I would say is that we just don't have enough experience and education going on, at least in the United States, to put people in a position to solve these mysteries. There's no education. We don't have any classes, no offense to Dr. Telesco and Nova Southeastern University, but there's no class that you have on disappearances, breaking them down, bit by bit over the course of a semester and giving people a really good handle on them. That's kind of my overview. I think that's one of the reasons we have 100,000 unsolved disappearances in the United States, is because we just have too many people who are responsible for solving them, that for the most part, they really don't know what they're doing. A lot of them are very well-meaning, but, I could be well-meaning teaching people physics, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be good at it.
Right. And and the other thing is, and this is in all fairness to my fellow law enforcement investigators, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna put anybody down for what they do. I was an investigator myself, and it was really, my investigations dealt with civilian complaints. So I was a sergeant at the time, assigned to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and worked on investigating and trying to exonerate police officers. And when they were found to be guilty, they were guilty, right? And when they were found to be innocent, they were innocent, and they were exonerated. But often it was more just like, unfounded. Not to, no pun intended.
There's
right?
that,
No
you
pun
put the ED
intended.
in it and it means something else.
Yeah,
Yes, of course.
exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
Right.
But we do have some of our students here, and we're going to focus on them for a minute, just for a second. If we could focus in on, I'd like to introduce them to our viewers. And we just have a little bit of a delay here on this monitor, but we have here Alex Suarez and we have Shannon Dentzel, and both of these students are, the cream of the crop. We have Alex, who's got, I know he says he's got 3.2 or 3.4 GPA, or
It's above a 3.0 GPA.
okay, very good, very good. That's all right. And
He's not going to go on the record with
That's
that.
right,
I'm
and
not
he's-
going into specifics.
okay, we won't go into too many specifics, but he is definitely looking to go into law school. Shannon, on the other hand, has a very high GPA. Am I right? You got to tell us what that is, because I'm just blown away by it.
It's a 3.88.
Oh my God, is that even real? Is that even human? Wow, that's really cool. So a 3.88, and you're a dual enrollment student. So that means that you're going for not only criminal justice as your major, but also law, right?
Yes.
So do either one of you have any questions for Ed? And maybe we could just widen it just a little bit, so that we could see Ed as well, and we see our two CJ students. And who wants to go first? Alex?
I'll go for
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So, one of my questions is one that just came up like a second ago.
Okay.
You were talking about how you've had over like 1,000 cases of experience, and you've like analyzed over something like that.
268 disappearances I've covered, but I've surely read a lot about more than that. But yes.
Yeah, but you said that DNA cases where like specifics come up with that is only like 5%.
Less than
or something.
5.
Less than 5%.
Less than 5.
So do you think DNA, like research and in terms of criminology, is like a big component? Or is it just like a little side piece that doesn't honestly influence whether or not a person is found most of the time?
Well, you have to remember, a lot of times the reason that forensics are not a topic is because there's just nothing to collect. I'm not saying that the person wasn't murdered, and somewhere probably out on the earth there is proof, forensic proof, that the person is dead, but nobody knows where to go look for that. And when I say that forensics are just not a part of it, the issue is that a lot of people disappear from their homes. And so if you go to their house, of course you're going to find their DNA in the house. Now, of course, you go in there and there's blood everywhere, then of course you know that something happened even if you don't find a body. But that is so rare. I was talking about the disappearance of Patty Action, coincidentally a disappearance that happened from where I live now in Clearwater, in that she went out with friends to a hotel bar. She left. They thought that she was going to go to the restroom and come right back. She never did. She was never seen again. Her car was found some days later, the inside of it covered with blood. Her remains, though, have never been found. So in that particular disappearance, forensics obviously important. This is before DNA, but they eventually showed that yes, this was Patty Action's DNA, but still it's unsolved because where is she? On top of that, you don't even have a suspect. So you know she's dead. The forensics show that, but who do you charge? So even when you have forensics, it's not even that helpful. So we just don't talk about it because there's really nothing to say. When forensics come up in disappearances, it is when remains are eventually found. So you can take a bone, it can be analyzed, compared to that person's DNA, maybe from a hairbrush or something that they had, and say, yes, this is the missing person. That person is deceased. And then the challenge, a huge challenge, is trying to determine, was this person murdered? Was it a crime? Or is this just somebody who wandered off into the woods, committed suicide, died of a heat stroke, overdosed? And that is very challenging. And there's at least one disappearance that's on the docket right now that continues on and on and on. Remains have been found, and I don't think they're ever going to determine this young man's cause of death, ever.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's like forensics is a good part and aspect of it, but it's more of the like identifying the person after they've been found, or like the remains have been found.
Obviously,
but the actual process of finding, it's not that effective.
No, the DNA does not help finding anybody. No, it does not.
Okay.
No, it helps identifying once remains can be tracked down, and a lot of them are of course there could be a lot of testing before you find the right person, but that would be about it.
Then my follow-up question to that was a lot of the cases are still unsolved. It's because usually they go into like a cold case. So what's the one factor that leads to the most amount of cold cases, and what can we do to limit that amount?
The big problem we have right now, the reason they become cold cases, my opinion, is that we just don't have enough experience on site at the time when the disappearance is reported. We're losing so much time in those first few days because too many investigators show up thinking, oh, the person will be back in a couple days, so we're gonna take your report, we're just gonna put it right over here because we think that person's gonna come back. Well, then a week later the person hasn't come back, and you're already a week behind. And if it is a murder, the person has moved on.
It's probably a little too late at that point.
It's a little late, right?
Yeah.
So we have to teach people who are responsible that when they show up and when the family or friends are telling them things, they have to be looking for certain words and start to be able to categorize it. This is this type of disappearance. These are the questions I should be asking. Here's where we should go look. That's not being done right now.
And all done under like a time-sensitive
Yes,
space.
that's right.
That's the most important crucial
right.
thing in terms of finding a person, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's not like that show, The First 48. It's way shorter time. It's like the first hour. It's like the first half hour. The First 48, it's just the title of a show. It's not scientific. That's just something to market the show. From a real live reality standpoint, it's like the first minute.
Yeah. Awesome. Shannon, you got a question?
Yeah, I had more of a personal question for you.
Yeah.
What got you into exploring missing persons cases? And obviously, like you said inside your presentation this morning, you like doing this to bring awareness to these cases, which I think is great because definitely having more information out there about these cases will help us find the people. But what got you into it in the first place?
It's just always been an interest of mine going way back. I'm 52 years old, so I remember when In Search Of was on TV.
10 years older than you.
Yeah, so
FYI.
still that's pretty
Okay.
close.
Yeah, just saying.
In Unsolved Mysteries, cops, I was fascinated with my friends. Their father was a part-time cop, and he had a scanner. And we lived in this little town, Leechburg, Pennsylvania. I was fascinated by just listening. But I knew that I was never going to be able to become a police officer because I don't like wearing uniforms and things like that. That was just never going to happen. So I've just always had an interest in mysteries and disappearances. And then the internet started, and then podcasting started. And then along the way, I got some public speaking experience, some writing experience, which you certainly need with podcasting. And then it all came together in 2016. That's how it happened. And then on top of that, it's been interesting, it's getting prepared for this live show tonight. It reminds me of my filmmaking days, and I just don't work very well with others. All right, so my mind...
One case that really frustrated you and got under your skin, you were like, we were that close to solving, we're like so close, but we couldn't just get there yet. Something that like, just bothered you not ever being able to get an answer to.
I don't like classifying disappearances like that, but I will give this example. Technically, it's a disappearance that is still unsolved. Very early on, I covered the disappearance of Eric Franks. He went missing in Michigan. He was there because he found out that his ex-girlfriend had their child. He didn't even know she was pregnant. She had this child, got married to another man. He finds out that he has this daughter. He goes to Michigan to be near his daughter. He gets a job up there. He's living in this motel. His ex-girlfriend's name is Kendra. She's married to a guy. His name is John. And he's up there, and then suddenly Eric goes missing one day. He and his car go missing. And this was some years ago. I forget what year exactly right now. But the belief was that he was murdered, and it had something to do with him trying to infuse himself back into his daughter's life, trying to get back with his ex-girlfriend, even though she's married. But then this ex-girlfriend dies. She dies of cancer. So there's only this guy John, and then the daughter who is still around. Everybody, including myself, we're thinking, well, if this was a murder, Eric's remains are somewhere, and this car is like probably trashed. It's at the bottom of a lake. It's been taken to a salvage yard or somewhere. We believe that it's so you're never going to find it. Here's what happened. In 2020, there was an estate sale in Michigan. A guy from Ohio went up there to bid on some things. And wouldn't you know, he bid on this car and got it. And the car had been in the garage of a guy, his name was Gerald Rutledge, and he had died. Older man, had died, but natural causes, and they were, selling off all his stuff. He had this car in his garage that didn't look like it had been running for a very long time, but it was still in pretty good shape. This guy in Ohio bought it, took it back, and what he was going to do was fix it up, make sure it was okay, and he was going to give it away to a poor family so somebody could drive it who couldn't afford a car. At the same time, there was some amateur person in California who just happened to do a Carfax on Eric's VIN. And wouldn't you know that this person had been doing this like every 6 months or something, and it popped up because this guy brought this car to get the oil changed. It popped up in this Carfax report. That was Eric Franks' car. Now you're wondering, well, how did this Gerald Rutledge guy get Eric's car? This ex-girlfriend, Kendra, she had been a caretaker for this guy. She had given this guy this car as a gift, quote unquote. And it sat in his garage. Now where I'm going with this is that had I known that when we covered that in 2017, that I knew Kendra had been a caretaker for Gerald Rutledge, I know I would have tried to figure out where he lived, because after the fact what I discovered was before Eric went missing, Gerald Rutledge had this garage behind his house. There were garage doors with windows in them. After he went missing, that same garage had garage doors. The garage doors had been replaced with no windows. Why? Because they were hiding the car there. So it was this close. It was, if I'd known about Gerald Rutledge, I'm pretty sure back in 2017, I would have found that car before that guy died, and maybe even before Kendra died.
Wait,
That
so
was that close.
if I'm hearing this correct, if it wasn't for the guy though who was like searching up the cars and made the connection to the person who sold at the auction in
Yeah.
Ohio, the case may have never been solved.
Well, it's still technically unsolved. Eric's not been found, but we know where his car is, and we now know for sure that it was a murder. It was not him just driving off the road in his car and
Right.
like Esther Westenbarger did and ended up at the bottom of the lake. Now we know for sure he was murdered. Why? Not sure. Kendra's dead. John is still walking around a free man, but they surely did something to him. I can't tell you how close. I was this close. So those are the things that keep you up at night as I continue to cover disappearances.
Great. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to Alex and to Shannon for being here. And, behind the scenes, we also have Noah Donato and Joey Jasinski, who are right here in the office, in our little studio here. And that's who's behind the camera. And Joey is assistant director. And then we've got Michaela Porter, who's inside, and she's answering the live chat. So we have a whole team here, Ed, for this show.
Yeah.
I want to thank you guys so much. And I'm just wondering if we could just get maybe, oh, there they are. So we see them now.
Whoops.
Whoa, they're destroying my office, and they're destroying all of my memorabilia. But anyway, so we want to thank you so much, Ed, for coming here all the way from Clearwater, right?
I'm driving back tonight. I'm looking forward to a nice long drive, not a lot of cars on the road.
Yeah, awesome, and we so much appreciate it. So you've been here with us all day long. 11 o'clock you did the class, from 11 to 12:30. Then we went out to lunch with everybody.
Great lunch, great
And
pizza.
it was great pizza.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should plug Esposito's, or maybe not supposed to say that, I don't know. But I do have something for you, and I wonder if I could get, let's see, Alex here. If you can give Ed this, Shannon, you can give Ed this, and we could show everybody, all of our viewers, the swag.
Yes.
The NSU swag.
I have some other swag that I have a Nova Southeastern pen and some other
I know.
things.
Well,
I
now
have
you got
sunglasses.
some
I got
even
a
better
little,
swag. So
I got a little rubber shark.
Let's see that. Shannon, you start, because that's the best one right there. I think that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
right?
I will wear that for my next live show that I do
Show
on
our
Monday
viewers?
nights. I will surely wear that
See,
for
look
the
at that.
next.
Oh, that's cool. And then we got some other swag here, which is a nice NSU
Yeah.
Abraham S.
Thank you.
Fischler College of Education
Thank
School
you.
of Criminal
Appreciate
Justice
it.
tumbler,
Mhm.
and we hope that fits you.
It will.
I don't
I'm
know if
sure.
it's a medium or what
Thank
it
you.
is, but
Thank
you
you.
know, anyway.
Yeah,
so-
I'll wear it next Monday for the live show
All
I do
right,
on
awesome,
YouTube. I
awesome.
will wear the shirt. I promise
That's
next
great.
Monday night.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
to my students, all of them behind the scenes and also here present. And I just want to say that we have been putting in the live chat a lot of our programs that we have. So shameless plug on that. Of course, we have a bachelor's degree, an undergrad degree in criminal justice. Also legal studies, right?
Yeah,
Well,
legal
you know,
studies.
that's not part of our college necessarily, but it's okay. It's all one big family. It's all NSU Sharks. Go Sharks. Should we do the thing that Dr. Hanbury always likes us
Fins
to
up.
do? Fins up thing? Okay. So we have a lot of programs in criminal justice. We also have a master's in criminal justice. That is awesome, and a PhD in criminal justice. So we have a lot of different programming here at all the different levels. You can see that we do a lot. I wish I had a little bit more time. I'd ask the students to brag on this program. I think we do a lot of experiential stuff, a lot of hands-on stuff. We like to bring in guests. They get an education not only in criminal justice but also in filmmaking, because we
Yeah.
do make films here. We made a run, hide, fight film that's outstanding, and we're doing a lot of active shooter training as a result of it. And we also worked on a domestic violence little 20-minute training video that Shannon starred in.
Yes.
And we're going to be doing some more stuff like that. So, you know, this is what our school is about. It's about bridging the gap between theory and practice through experiential learning. Ed, you want to plug your show?
Sure. Tomorrow, the next episode is coming out at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's the disappearance of Bernard Rustness and Peggy McKay from Wolf Lake, Minnesota in 1976. It's kind of a unique one in that there was a house fire. Their son was found dead in the fire, but Bernard and Peggy were not.
Interesting.
And so there's a lot of rumors that have gone on. Did they cause the fire themselves and run off? Or were they caught up in the fire and somehow it burned hot and long enough for them to be completely incinerated? It'll be up for the listeners to decide tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. But you can find the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Join us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. The website, theunfoundpodcast.com. And I also have another podcast, Unfound Live, that comes out on Tuesdays. And that is an audio version of the YouTube show I do on Monday nights.
Okay, awesome. And it's, again, on YouTube, it's Unfound.
The Unfound Podcast channel.
Okay,
Yes.
the Unfound Podcast
Yeah,
channel.
a lot
Make
of
sure
stuff
you
there.
go there and
Yes.
make sure you click on the notifications bell.
Subscribe to.
Make sure
yes.
you subscribe. And hey, I got some great news about our YouTube channel. We hit 500 subscribers. It was either yesterday or today, but that's pretty cool. Yeah, thank you. That's very good. Awesome. We're very excited about that. It cannot compare to the Unfound Podcast YouTube channel.
Yeah, it
which
is, but there's a lot of true crime channels that
how
have many
many,
more listeners.
How many subscribers do you have?
We're almost have 15,000, but there are a
right.
lot of true
Well,
crime channels that have way more
that's-
than that.
that's
but
awesome. That's
I'm
pretty
proud of
cool.
it.
Yeah, I want to see our Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice
Mm-hmm.
channel. So if you're watching us right now, please subscribe, hit the bell, so this way you'll get notified for all of our stuff. I do have to shamelessly plug some of the really amazing things that we have coming up. And I know that Joey knows this stuff off the top of his head. I do believe like that the next one is what, Joey? Can you tell us?
It's going to be on September 28th.
September 28th, and we are going to be hosting who?
We're going to be hosting Sheriff.
Sheriff Wayne Ivey?
Yes.
Yes,
the
Sheriff
sex
Wayne Ivey.
trafficking
He's going to talk
prosecutor.
about active shooter training. He's going to be talking about active shooter incidents and prevention, mitigation, response, all of that. And then we have The Fall of the Godfather, right?
with
With
Joe
Joe O'Brien.
O'Brien.
He's a former FBI agent and a PhD graduate. You gotta check that out. When is
Okay.
that? That's October
6th.
6th. He's amazing, Joey, isn't he?
Okay.
You just
Okay.
ask him and he knows it exactly. And for those of you who've been watching us, Joey is our yes, please, let's show Joey. He is the new Brendan. If you guys remember.
Sure.
Hi,
He's-
Brendan.
Right, that's right. Hopefully Brendan's watching us. I
Right.
don't know if he is. But, and then the third big thing for all you forensics people is that's going to be in November
With Teresa Lily White.
with Teresa Lily White, and she is a
Yes.
forensic anthropologist. We were talking this morning about a bone that was discovered.
Yeah, Noah Davis, yes.
Noah Davis, and that made me think about Lily White, Teresa White, who's going to be on our show, and that's going to be November,
It's going to be November. I think it's the 11th.
maybe.
They're all on Thursday nights at
They're
7.
all on Thursday nights at 7:00. So again, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel because then you'll get the notification. But she's a forensic anthropologist, and the name of the show is going to be "I've Got a Bone to Pick with You."
Oh,
and I
no,
call right
that's
up your
terrible.
alley.
Yeah, I love plays on
Okay.
words. Yeah, that's
Okay, very
terrible.
good. All right, everybody. So thank you so much. We want to thank Dean Durham. We want to thank Dean Kushner, Dr. Marcelo Castro, all of these three of our fearless leaders who support everything that we do. And want to say thank you to all of our students once more. Thank you, Ed, for coming.
Yeah, it's been
And
great.
this was great
was
in
worth the wait.
person. I think it was really cool in person. We'll make another